agree on your end. You have to agree to be part of all that. So we're getting on standby here for Dr. Steve Schwartz, one of our former San Diego chapter presidents. But that's such a small part of his resume anymore. Such a small part.
A very influential one, though. It's a very important part.
Yeah, it was a step, right? I mean,
all ACS's fault. It's all ACS's fault. I don't blame him for
that darn Ray Gilmore. All right, I think we could probably start, Leanne. Go ahead, and I'll back out.
Okay, no problem. Welcome everyone, and Happy New Year. It is January 2022, if you can believe it. Our next presentation will be held February 9th, and it will also be held via Zoom. And it's going to be Sabina Siddiqui who will talk to us about the song of the Hawaiian Humpback. And I just want to remind everyone, if you have any ideas for speakers or presentations, or if you want to become a board member, please email us at acssandiego1010@gmail. Again, that's acssandiego10@gmail. So this evening's speaker is Dr. Steven Schwartz. He's the co-director and founder of the Laguna San Ignacio Ecosystem Science Program. In 1977, he and Mary Lou Jones conducted the first systemic study of gray whales in Laguna San Ignacio, Baja California Sur, Mexico. And Dr. Schwartz continues to research and publish his findings on gray whales and their breeding in the lagoons of Baja. Dr. Schwartz also worked for the Ocean Conservancy, the U.S. Marine Mammal Commission, and the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service, and served as a consultant to the Mexican government's Ministry for the Environment, Natural Resources, and Fisheries. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Steven Schwartz.
Well, thank you, Leanne. It's a very, thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it very, very much. And it is a real pleasure for me to get to see everyone. I've been scrolling through the view of everybody who's online. It's kind of fun to see a lot of old friends. And I'm so pleased that we're able to tune in this evening. And I hope that I find my talk, my presentation interesting and entertaining to a degree. And I'm so glad that you're here and are interested in gray whales at this point in time. So as I was telling Rick before we got on, I feel a little bit out of place because this is the first time in my life that I've ever addressed to the San Diego chapter, and I'm not in Sumner Auditorium. Where's my podium? And those creaky floorboards, you know, I really miss that. But this will do. This is just fine. This is just fine. So if I can begin, I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we'll see if we can get this presentation underway. Share. Here we go. And can you see it on that end?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm still trying to get to, there we go. I think that'll work for me. There we are. Gray whales of Laguna San Ignacio, status update for 2021-2022. And this is to the American Cetacean Society San Diego chapter. And it is, again, my pleasure to be talking with everyone this evening. And we will be talking about the subject at hand, and that's the Northeastern Pacific gray whale. We know there are Western gray whales, and we know that they mix a bit with the Northeastern populations, particularly during the winter migration, but that's a whole nother lecture. So we'll save that for another time. Right now, there's about 25,000 or so Northeastern Pacific gray whales, the ones that migrate down the Pacific coast of North America, and those are the subject of this evening's talk. So the last time we got together was in 2020, and we talked about the unusual mortality event. So I'll update you on that. What we know about the 2019 UME, so I'll update you on that. Observations from the lagoons in San Ignacio and Bahia Magdalena from last year, and ongoing research on body and reproductive condition. And we've got some new information, thanks to some very, very close friends and good colleagues of ours that have been working very hard in the Arctic while we've been working hard in Baja about what's going on up there. So we'll try and fill in some of the what ifs and the blanks there. And then, of course, we'll salt everything with a good, healthy dose of speculation, because obviously, as you know, studying cetaceans is like working with a crossword puzzle that somebody returned to the store with only half the pieces. So we'll move on ahead with that. Now, when Mary Lou previewed my presentation, she said it's very nice, but there are just too many graphs and too many lists. And so you got to have more pictures. So at her encouragement, I will be salting the talk with pictures of whales and whale-like things for your visual pleasure, as well as learning something about the whales. So let's start off with an update on the UME, the unusual mortality event. It began in 2019, and continues, unfortunately, to 2021, and we're hoping it'll go away by 2022. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration hosted or put together in 2019 an unusual working group to study and evaluate the gray whale mortality. The coordinator of that is Deborah Fauquier of the National Marine Fisheries Service. And you'll notice down here that Jorge Urban, our co-director, is a member of that group. And they've been tracking the stranding rates and the mortalities of the gray whales since 2019. At this point, as of April 5th, 2021, all the little dots here show you where all the strandings have been taking place, and you can see it is a range-wide event, and it involves all age and sex classes of gray whales. And so they've been dying at an unusually accelerated rate over the past 3 years. In the continental United States, excuse me, that includes Alaska, sorry. So all the US and Canada, there have been in 2019, 122 known strandings. 2020, 79. It seems to be winding down with only 55 in 2021, but you see COVID has interfered. Whoops, go back here. COVID has interfered with the field work, so we're not sure how many we're really missing. Also, these are minimum numbers because a lot of the whales never make it to the beach. They sink at sea and are lost forever. So this is just an indicator of more or less of a trend than actual head counts. At the bottom by country, you see Canada started off with 11 in 2019, and they're down to 5 this past year. Again, COVID has restricted the response to strandings. US 55 this year, and Mexico 54. So we also see overall a declining trend, which perhaps is good news that fewer of the whales are dying from whatever is causing this unusual mortality event. Quick comparison, there was one of these events before in at the turn of the century, 1999 to, wait a second, excuse me, what graph am I looking at? No, this is a comparison of this year, or this UME. The orange bars are 2019, which was the peak spike. Then 2020 are the green bars, dropped down a bit, and 2021. And then we've got a few this year that are not on the graph, but the little gray bar is the 18-year average. So you can see that the stranding rates are quite accelerated, and it constituted a significant event. This again is a tabulation of all the stranded animals that have been examined. And if you look at the bottom of the 200 or so that people have been able to examine, 89 of those were definitely suffering from malnutrition. There were 22 that had obvious human interaction, ship strikes, entanglements, and so on. Approximately 20 had apparently killer whale predation was the cause of their demise. And the unknown at this point is whether or not they're suffering from some sort of a pandemic like we are. There's a lot of the National Institutes of Health have chimed in to help NOAA analyze samples or screening for viruses and other types of diseases that may or may not be contributing to the overall stranding increase, as well as biotoxins. So this basically are some ideas about what some of the contributing factors are, but as always, it's still questionable as to what the direct cause of this is. So while we know that the whales are suffering, we're not sure why they're suffering at this point in time, but we're getting some good ideas and starting to put together a picture of what's been going on. First question is, has this ever happened before? And yes, it did. In 1999, 2000, the turn of the century, There was another unusual mortality event where we had whales stranding in emaciated condition, and that was reported in the literature. And if you compare that with what we're looking at now, this is the graph I was looking for a moment ago. The gray bars are 1999, and then the next year, purple are the 2000, and then compared with the 2019, 2020, and the 2021, the current UME. You can see that the 1999 UME occurred. It wasn't quite as severe as the one we have going on right now, but 2000 definitely was. The stranding rates back then, although few of us can remember that, were quite high. And again, the same types of symptoms, a lot of malnutrition, animals looking like they're emaciated and skinny, and then the usual sprinkling of interactions with human activities that cause their demise or killer whale activity. So we work in San Ignacio Lagoon and also in Bahia Magdalena. And we started noticing things that came to our attention early on before the UME actually started. So we'll talk about those a little bit. Single whales seem to be the animals that were suffering the most or most frequently. And so if we look at some of our survey data for Laguna San Ignacio, we do weekly boat surveys and get counts of the number of animals that are around. And we can see that here in the dates across the bottom, January 15 on the left-hand side over here in the corner goes all the way across to the middle of April over here on the right-hand side. And you can see that the whales start arriving at the lagoon in January and early February, and they reach their peak usually at the end of February, beginning of March. And then as they start to leave, the numbers drop off. So one of the first things we noticed in the last 4 years, there seems to have been a delay in their arrival. They weren't arriving as early as they had in previous years. We also noticed that the single whale counts, these are adult males and females without calves, the single whale counts were similar. They weren't too bad. They're between 100 and 150, maybe as high as 200 in some years. And that's to be expected. But then we noticed this last year in 2021, the whales hung around. They not only arrived 2 weeks late, but they hung on for another 2 weeks before they actually decided to leave the lagoon. And we'll be talking about some of the reasons why that may have occurred. On the other hand, with the females that have got calves, that have given birth to a calf for the year, were a little bit differently. And this is what really got our attention. The green and the yellow are 2016 and 2017, which are like normal years for San Ignacio Lagoon, anywhere at the peak of the season between 80 and 100 or even 150, sometimes in a bumper year, numbers of females with calves of the year. But in 2018, they never showed up. That's the blue line down at the bottom. And you can see it's just hovering around the 20 number. We had few instances of more than 20 mother calf pairs counted in 2018. 2019, 20 and 21 were even worse. We had less than 20. And that was very unusual, which meant either they're not coming into the lagoon or the breeding rate has dropped off or they're just not surviving. So we're not sure what was going on other than this was rather distressing to see that there's so few females with calves of the year when there should be a bunch. Let me see. Okay, so here we go. The counts below 20 for the years of 2018, 2019, 20, 21, which is set off the alarms. What we wanted to see were lots of these little guys. This is a brand new little calf. It's only a few hours old. You can see all the fetal folds on it. But overall, it's in generally very good condition. It's not emaciated. It's fat and floppy. And its mother was also in pretty good shape. So we weren't sure, other than the low numbers, what was causing. Maybe they just weren't coming into the lagoon. Although our observers that are looking along shore outside the lagoons, they weren't picking them up. Alicia and her gang in LA weren't counting them coming down south. We usually rely on those counts from their group to tell us what to expect in the next week or two. So they weren't seeing them either. So looking back, our program started in 2006. So this is 6 years or 7 years after the turn of the century UME. And we were documenting our photo IDs, which are randomly acquired, 11% to 13% of emaciated or skinny whales, and you can pick them out quickly because their scapulas are showing. There's a depression behind the skull here where it should be fat, and if you look at the flank, which I'll show you in a minute or so, they're concave rather than convex. So that was in the wake of the turn of the century, the 1999 to 2000 UME. Our program got rolling, and right away, the press picked up on this, and we saw things like this: Giants of the Seas find slimmer pickings. The LA Times, Kenneth Weiss went around and interviewed everybody he could get a hold of from Alaska down to Baja, and tried to piece together what was going on. And at that point in time, we thought it was strictly just a food thing. Weren't sure, people were unprepared to do any necropsies or respond much other than just to notice statistically how many skinny whales we were seeing. Well, a couple more years down the line, we had a student by the name of Irandi Calderon, and for her thesis, she took the photo ID data from 2008 to 2011 and analyzed body condition. She was then followed by Flor Razon and Sergio Martinez, our field chief, who picked up Irandi's analysis and analyzed the data beginning in 2018 and here in the slide 2019, but they've continued to do that all the way through 2021. And what they did was they used 3 areas of the body to score the animals or evaluate their body condition. This postcranial area, which in a healthy animal should be rounded and fat. The scapular region on a healthy animal, you really don't see the leading edge, the anterior edge of the scapula protruding through the side of the skin. And then the dorsal flank, which should be in a healthy animal convex and not concave. And by assigning numerical scores to these various 3 areas, they were able to rank the whales based on the photographs that we had of them. And here's what they discovered. Now remember, 2008 to 2011 were Irandi's analysis, and then Flor and Sergio picked up through 2020. And so the single whales in 2008, we're looking, the red bars I'll draw your attention to, these are the animals in poor condition. 2008, 6.7%, 2009, 7.6%, nothing really alarming there. 2010, 6.2, and then it started to pick up, it started to go back down in 2011. Now there was a gap. I needed a student to pick up the research, and that was where Flor came in. And in 2018, she had discovered 8.2% of the animals that we photographed showed some indication of malnutrition or emaciation. But the thing that, again, that got our attention was in 2019, that jumped to 23.6%. And by 2020, it was 30%. And it's not on the slide, but this past year, it was again 27%. So there was a disturbingly rapid increase in the number of animals that we were seeing in poor body condition based on this analysis procedure of scoring photographs. The flip side of that is that although there were few in number, the females that had calves were looking pretty good. In 2008 to 2011, we basically had very few skinny moms. They had healthy calves and they were looking pretty good themselves. In 2018, 19, and 20, again, only 2.5%, 0%, and 6% of the moms showed any indication of having any sort of, emaciation or poor body condition. So while the single whales were showing a real decline and a disturbingly quickly increasing rate of the percent of the emaciated singles, we weren't seeing that with the mothers with calves. And that caused us to scratch our heads a bit and try and think about what could be the mechanism here that's setting these guys aside. And it took a while to try and piece that together. And it took some more methodology, some more investigation. So while Irandi's and Flor's work using a subjective scoring procedure based on photographs was okay, we wanted something that was a little more quantitative if possible. So we called in the drones. This I just have to say as an aside, for me, having done this for a long time, back in the early days, we used film. Those of you may or may not remember what film was all about. It's kind of this piece of plastic with an emulsion on it, and you expose it to light and it turns color. So if you put that through a camera lens, you can get an image, okay? But then you don't know what you have until you go home at the end of a 3-month winter and take it to the pharmacy and have them develop it. And then you find out that everything was out of focus, okay? So film was the tool of the day, but it was limited. You couldn't take lots of pictures because it's hard to get in Mexico in the winter. And anyway, the advent of digital photography just turned that all around. First, for photo ID, you can shoot as many pictures as you want. You can tell immediately after you shot the picture whether you got the image you needed. If not, you can try again. When you get back to the lab, you can sort through these things and pick out the best images. Then you can get into Photoshop and enhance them and enlarge them and crop them. And it just turned the whole world around. Well, the next revolution was to put those high density or high density, what am I trying to say? Good cameras, high definition cameras and video in a drone, and then fly it around and take pictures of the whales that way. And so that's what we did with the help of Frederick Christensen and Lars Bader, a good Swede on the left and a good Dane on the right. They worked up a methodology in Australia with southern right whales, looking at mother and calf pairs. And their first investigation was to see if they could estimate energy conversion efficiency between mom and calf. In other words, how much of mom's body fat gets ultimately deposited in new tissue in a growing calf, and how does the mom shrink and how does the calf grow? And they did that using the drone photography. Well, we were talking to those guys and invited them to San Ignacio, and they are now active colleagues with the program. And they've got, we're actually on our 3rd generation of new pilots. This is our first year working with the drones at the lagoon. On the left is Fabian Rodriguez, and on the right is Fabian Vivatir. Fabian Rodriguez is from La Paz, and so he became Fabian Uno, and Fabian Vivatir is from France, and so he's Fabian Deux. So if you say Fabian, you have to follow it by either Uno or Deux, or you may get an answer from both of them, which becomes very confusing. Anyway, using the drones, it gave us the sky hook we needed to get the information that would be a lot more quantitative in the assessment of the animals. So you basically have a drone that's loaded with sensors, LiDAR, altimeters, high definition cameras, high definition video, and you fly this sucker out remotely until you find a whale, and then you hover over the whale and you discover that this one's actually a mom and a calf. And so you're able to take and get very, very high resolution photographs, control the drone from the ground. Now here's Fabian is piloting the drone and taking pictures, video along the way. He starts the video. He can also take still pictures, but he prefers generally the technique is to take a video. Then when you bring the video back to the lab, you can go through it frame by frame, so to speak, and pick out the best images and even glue, images together if you don't get all of the whale at the surface at the time. But you get these nice crisp images of the whale, which are great for photo ID, but they're also good for measuring the whale, the width and the girth of the whale. And the extra bonus is they're also excellent behavior tools. You're looking at whale behavior you just can't really see all of from a boat when you're on the water. Up in the air, it just opens up a whole new world of possibilities as far as studying the whale's behavior as well as their body condition. And after a half an hour, the batteries are running low, so the drone has to fly home back to the office. And it comes down and lands in the desert, whereupon Fabian can download the microchip out of it, the storage card, and change the battery pack and get it ready to go onto its next test. So we have a good picture here, an animal that's perfectly flat on the water. And basically, I'll show you how we divide those things up and turn them into an estimate of a body condition. To start with that, here's the first example. On the top, we have these are not the same whale, by the way, these are different whales, but up the top is a healthy animal. You get that classic torpedo shape, very hydrodynamic, extremely good for swimming through the water, and minimum drag. And down below, you see we have an emaciated or skinny whale. And you can see when I'm talking about the spine is sticking up. You can see the spinal column. It's concave on the flanks. These lines here are the flippers folded back, and right above that is the scapula. At this angle, you can't see the depression behind the skull, but there's a big divot here where there should be fatty tissue. So this animal is in extreme emaciated condition. Well, now that we had our sky hook or our eyes in the air and we could hover around the whales like the birds do, we could start doing some quantitative science. And so they take those photographs and they basically slice the whale up from the tip of the rostrum down to a predetermined spot, the notch of the flukes, and they put it up in 5% slices like that. And then you just do some simple geometry and you estimate the volume of each slice and you sum those, and that gives you the total mass of the whale. And then if you do that repeatedly throughout a 3-month season, you can see that mama gets smaller because she's on a diet and feeding her calf, and the calf gets larger and grows. So again, getting back to the original work that Lars and Frederick did, looking at energy conversion, you can get that. But we discovered this is extremely useful for looking at body condition. So what we did, we have here, forget how many, there's 1,245 measurements over a 3-year period of the whales. Come back, please. There we go. The black line on the left, the curved line, is the line fitted to all of those data points. The red are calves, the green are juveniles, and the blue and the gray are adults. The gray are the single adults, and the blue are the mothers that have calves that year, lactating females. If you do a quick log transformation on the data, it helps to point it to make it a little more understandable. Down here, we have body length at the bottom. So we can see when the calves are born, they're a little bit undersized, okay? They're below the average, if you want to call that trend line an average. But as they grow, you can see they migrate north of that. They start to get fat and pudgy like good babies do as their mom takes care of them. The green are the juveniles. You can see that they're also, you know, recently weaned or only a few years since weaning, and they're not really good at feeding or not really good at packing on the calories. So they end up even coming to the lagoon after a feeding season a little on the low side. And then they overlap here in the blue and the gray, but the moms that are lactating generally are in pretty good shape. And that corresponds to the earlier analysis that Flor and Randy did that showed that the mothers with calves were in pretty good shape. It was the singles that were having some issues with being emaciated. So here's kind of another way of looking at it. If you see the 0 line going across the middle of this particular graph, that's that trend line fitted to all the data. And the gray bars are the 2017 early and late data of photographs. The red are the 2018 early and late season. 2019 is in blue, and the green are the 2020. So if we start with the calves on the left, we'll see that when they're born, except for 2017, and I think that's an artifact of just we had a small sample size, at least that's what the statistics tell us. But in general, they start off a little on the skinny side, but you know, nursing on mom's rich milk, they quickly pass over the average body condition. And by the end of the season, you know, they're in the good zone. They're up in the positive zone. The moms, on the other hand, if we go to the far right, you see the lactating females are on the right-hand side. They start out in really good condition, but they're losing weight over the season. And by the end of the season, end of the breeding season in April and May, you know, they're approaching that average median condition point. So they're losing condition as they transfer their body fat into milk and then nurse the calf, and it ends up in the calf. The juveniles and the adults in these years, 2017 to 2020, are arriving at the lagoon borderline. You see, they're right at the average condition line. And during the season, because they're not feeding, they're continuing to deteriorate. They're losing weight, they're losing condition as the season goes along. And that also accounts the same similar trend. You see the declining condition in the adults that don't have calves. As I said, if they don't turn that around by getting up to and finding some food and start feeding, they're not gonna get back above that average line into the positive side if they continue like this. At the very bottom down here, we have 2 horizontal dotted lines, and these are the body condition maximum and minimum for measurements from stranded dead whales. So you can see this declining trend is sending these guys toward a point where they're going to die. And that gave us the first heads up that if the condition is deteriorating this quickly, this could be a major contributor to the mortality events that we're seeing. And we published a paper on that in 2021 in January, where we say that poor body condition, may be a major factor in the overall unusual mortality events that we're experiencing that began in 2019 and are continuing to this point. So what the heck is going on? Again, it's one of the things that keeps me going on this is we never have all the pieces to the puzzle, and it's great to try and put things together. We're now going to take and jump to the Arctic. Sue Moore has been a friend and a colleague for my entire professional career. She's a great biologist, a great scientist, and she's spent a lot of time now working in the Arctic at the Center for Ecosystem Sentinels at the Biology Department at the University of Washington. This last October, she gave a case review, a presentation at a case review on gray whale distribution and feeding ecology in the Bering and Chukchi Seas to the UME working group. And she kindly allowed me to use some of her slides here to illustrate some points that she was trying to illustrate to the UME study group on what we think was going on. The first thing she pointed out is that gray whales, if you look on the left-hand side, we see their migratory route along North America, all pointed out. They span from Baja California all the way up through the Bering Sea into the Chukchi Sea. And along that route on the right, we see lots of little circles of different colors. These are areas where gray whales are known to at least stop and sample the fare. They will go to river mouths, they will go to inland estuaries, they'll go to mudflats along their migratory route, and their observations of them feeding in these locations, or at least trying to feed on whatever's there. The key, of course, is what is there. In the further south you go in latitude, there's less and less biomass in the way of invertebrate prey that gray whales focus on. But the higher in the latitudes you go, with the longer summer days and upwelling and the nutrients that are available, it's much, much better food availability in the higher latitudes along the North American coast. Now, this illustration does not show the primary feeding areas that are off of the Bering in the Bering Sea, the Chukchi Sea, and the classic Chirikov Basin, which we'll get to in just a second. One of the things that became apparent, and you've all heard bits and pieces of this in different arenas, was that there's a major ecosystem shift that's been going on in the Bering Sea for the last couple of decades. Jackie Gerbermeyer and her colleagues published a paper on this in 2006, where they were saying that the loss of sea ice, the reduction in upwelling, the lack of the freshwater seasonal input into that system, the warming of the water and the change in the salinity are all causing all physical attributes of what's causing a change in the fauna, including whale food, gray whale food in the northern Bering Sea. Shortly thereafter, actually in 2020, Henry Huntington and colleagues published a similar article suggesting that there's a transformation going on in the Pacific Arctic ecosystem, and it's going to have implications for a lot of marine life, not just whales, but marine fish, marine birds, and so on. So the big culprit here seems to be the loss of the sea ice and the warming, extreme warming conditions that started in 2017 and at this publication in 2019, but are continuing even now, that are raising havoc with the traditional seasonal primary production and secondary production that forms the basis of the food chain up there. So Sue Moore kind of broke it into three primary categories of change. Beginning at the top, we're talking about the sea ice. There's been a record seasonal retreats of permanent and seasonal sea ice in the Arctic beginning in 2007, a major decline in 2012, and then again in 2016 and in 2020. And to put it in perspective, there's been a 50% loss of sea ice in the Arctic by area, but that represents a 75% by volume and a much longer ice-free period in the Arctic which has implications for the sun not being reflected by the ice and instead being warming the dark green water that absorbs sunlight and helping to warm the Arctic Ocean. There was a surprise winter sea loss, ice loss, say that fast, winter loss of sea ice near the Bering Straits in 2017, 18, and 2019. But the bottom line is there's just not as much ice there anymore as it used to be, you know, on a seasonal basis. So we mentioned that the sun can now warm the water, and they're seeing that. The second factor are the heat storms and advection. SST, sea surface temperature in the Bering Strait and inflow in the Mackenzie Plume Delta from the east are bringing fresh water and heat into the Arctic system, and it's having some big effects there. Changing of the climate and the wind patterns are creating storms in the high Arctic, and these storms are becoming more prevalent and more severe, and they're causing deep mixing and upwelling of the Arctic waters with all of this warmer input that's coming in, and the lack of the freshwater runoff that used to be coming from all of the melted ice, which isn't there anymore. And this has created an advection phenomenon where there's been a 50% increase in the transport of nutrients and plankton through the Bering Straits into the Arctic since 2001. So we're getting warmer seas, we're getting mixing where there used to be stratification, it's upset the upwelling, and we're having more and more warm nutrients and plankton moving from the Bering Sea area to the south through the Bering Straits and into the Arctic. And this is turning the whole, you know, prey base that we grew up with as gray whale biologists kind of on its ear. Now we'll look at primary production. Primary production has increased by 57% overall in the Arctic because of all of this warming and mixing and advection of water coming in. And in the Chukchi Sea in particular, it's been 96% increase in primary production. We're seeing for the first time, or they're seeing for the first time, massive undersea phytoplankton blooms reported in some areas. And these also, you've heard of the harmful algal blooms that have been occurring along the North American coast in the recent decade. So all these changes are real, they're happening, but the thing that's really surprising, as she says at the bottom of this slide, they're happening a lot faster than anyone ever predicted they would happen. This is like climate change on steroids sort of thing going on. Here's just a couple of examples to point out what she's talking about. The 2012 ice that's shown there on the figure on the left is compared to the pink or the purple outline, which was in the 1980s, 1990s, which is where the sea ice, the summer sea ice used to be. It's not there anymore. So all of that ocean is now open, absorbing sunlight and causing changes. On the right-hand side, you can see the blue line is the 2020, and the dotted line is the 2012, which is the most extreme Arctic sea ice loss. And you can see that 2020 is pretty much approaching that extreme that occurred in September of 2012. So very well documented that the sea ice is lost. One more illustration. On the left, we have March of 2013, and you can see the ice pack in red and purple, filling pretty much all of the Bering area. And the same date in 2019, there's just no ice there anymore. What ice is there is much further north, and then that recedes even more, as we saw from the previous figure, during the summer months. So a lot more open water that's changing the water currents and the advection. This is a combination of the figure on the left, annual persistence, is a combination of the figure in the middle, which is the sea ice breakup, and the figure on the right, which is sea ice formation. The red colors are indicators of the number of days per decade that they've changed. And you can see there have been major changes. Again, if you look at the figure on the left, the annual persistence, the Bering Strait inflow as a result of the loss of the ice and the early breakup of the ice that is there has created this 50% increase of water moving through the Bering Straits into the Arctic. And that takes with it the heat flux. So it's bringing water and heat, hot water, hotter water into the area, which is changing the system and resulting in some rather serious problems with the infauna that the whales feed upon. We'll return now to Jackie Gregemeyer's Benthic time series. She documented in the traditional gray whale feeding area, this is the St. Lawrence Island here, and this is the Chiricahua Basin. There used to be lots of amphipods there. And if you look over here on the graph, she documented beginning in the mid-1980s, a continuous decline in the number of amphipods per square meter in the Chiricahua Basin. So there's been a definite, between 84, I think, and 2001 or two, a serious decline in the number of amphipods that were there. Interestingly enough, with the changes in the water flow from the south moving through the Bering Straits into the north, there have been new hotspots developed for plankton. Here's the old Chiricahua Basin down here. The bright red, obviously, are the hotter the hotspots, the higher density of crustaceans. And then another hotspot that's new on the scene, more or less, right up here, just inside of the Arctic. And then further up off the north coast of Alaska, some more spots are showing up where you're getting higher densities of crustaceans than had ever been seen previously. And if you compare this with gray whale distributions, it starts to make some sense. This is the Chiricahua Basin back between 1981 and 85, the distribution of gray whales there. And this was the hotbed of where gray whales went to feed. I mean, we all knew they went to the Chiricahua Basin and they saw the mud plumes and so on. There were gray whales up in here through the Bering Straits, but not that many, certainly not in any huge concentrations between 81 and 85 when these surveys were done. Now, fast forward to 2009 and 2019, and we can see that just north of the Chiricahua Basin, where that hotspot was of the crustacean densities, we've now got gray whales hanging out. And then if you move up into off the coast of the north coast of Alaska, near shore, the yellow dots are all gray whale sightings, all congregating here, but they're also congregating offshore. And the things that the biologists are still investigating, we're not sure of what types of prey are available, but there are a lot of krill up there. And so this, as it says down here at the bottom, the 17-fold decline in gray whale abundance in the Chiricahua Basin coincided with a decline in amphipod prey, but the aerial surveys in the Arctic now show the gray whales have shifted their summer distribution, and the area up there is known for krill. And that's an active area investigation to know exactly what type of invertebrates are there and whether or not the gray whales are feeding upon them, but they're certainly there. Gray whales usually go where there's food rather than go to someplace where there isn't food. So the implication is that they're up there taking advantage of the prey that are available in those areas. So sitting back and looking at all of this, Sue and her colleagues have decided we need to change our idea of what this pelagic benthic coupling model has been for decades. Previously, we all grew up with the model of a benthic dominated past coupling model, where we had ice algae and all of this ice in the Arctic and the sun shining through it and the nutrient rich water underneath it created these sheets of algae growing on the bottom sides of the ice. And as the ice broke up, the stuff would fall and sink to the bottom and become the basis for the food chain for benthic communities of demersal fish, gray whales, bearded seals, walrus, and diving ducks. There was some phytoplankton production that fed a zooplankton component, but the primary component was this benthic carpet of organic material that's descending down from the ice, the bottom of the ices that broke up every year. Well, the ice isn't there anymore. So this is a new model that they're considering. It's now a phytoplankton rather than an ice algae based system. And the ice algae is now taking the second seat as far as primary production. And because the phytoplankton are mobile, they're feeding zooplankton that are even more mobile, and very little is getting to the benthos. Instead, it's feeding pelagic fish, gray whales, bowhead whales, and seabirds. And so this is a change in the whole primary production scheme for the Arctic, going from the ice algae-based dominated system to now a phytoplankton-based system. And that's attracting new predators, offering new opportunities for some species, and also changing, in the case of the gray whale, for example, the distribution of the animals during the months when they're in the Arctic, trying to find enough food to make it through the next winter. So the ocean is changing, and we start to wonder, what does this mean to something like a gray whale? So we start by looking at the history of gray whales. This is a plot of NOAA's gray whale surveys that began in the late 1960s on the left, all the way up to 2020 on the right. And you can see that blue line would generally increase, but then it would drop out every once in a while, and there'd be a decrease. And I've drawn some yellow boxes around these increases followed by decreases. And you can see this is sort of a sawtooth pattern that has somewhat some regularity to it. This particular drop right here was the result of the 1999-2000 unusual mortality event. And then the whales seem to have recovered for that over time, reached a peak around 2016 or 2018. And then we went into this 2019 to 2021 unusual mortality event and the high stranding rates. And we have this decline again. So a rather erratic population history here for gray whales, up and down, up and down, up and down. And we're starting to wonder now how much of this is being influenced by the changes in the environment, particularly the types of changes that we're seeing now in the Arctic Ocean. So gray whales seem to be responding to various environmental conditions as they change. We see their population history has rises and falls. Their feeding grounds have shifted from traditional areas like the Chirikov Basin to other areas, and even further south around the Gulf of Alaska, around Kodiak Island, gray whales are feeding extensively there where they had not before in historical times. We've noticed these mortality events seem to come and go as the populations increase and then they decline. Migration timing has been changed as far as looking at it from points along the coast, like the census work that's done by the Fisheries Service out of Granite Canyon. They're just south of Monterey. Reduction, and then the counts in the lagoons that we're part of. Reduction in calf production, which means the reproductive rate is slowing and calving intervals are changing and becoming more longer than the classic 2-year period that we all, again, grew up with. And then the skinny whales, what's the deal with the body condition declining? So these all seem to be happening coincident with these environmental changes that are going on. Yet some of the whales seem to be doing just fine. They're nice and fat and they're healthy and they keep coming back each year to Mexico in pretty good condition, while others are emaciated and are dying along the migratory route. So we realize that gray whale habitats are undergoing environmental changes more rapidly than expected and are likely affecting the whale's prey distribution and availability. We know that gray whales have expanded their foraging efforts spatially, temporally, and are utilizing alternative prey. But the question is, do those have equal nutritional value? Is one amphipod worth 2 krill or 1 ghost shrimp? Or, what's the exchange value? Do they have to work harder if they don't have their primary benthic favorites around and have to take and prey switch to try some other things? Again, this is something that's not known, but if the nutrition is not equal, that could be one of the contributors to the things that we're seeing with body condition decline. We noticed that gray whales have periodically experienced unusually high mortality events and lower calf production and shifts in their seasonal distribution, migration, and timing. So how frequent are these environmental conditions imposing their will upon the life history of the gray whales and their survival? These are all things that start to come to light. And of course, the bottom line here is the skinny whale suggests that for some reason, even though they spend a summer feeding in the higher latitudes, some of the whales are not acquiring enough body fat and reserves to make it through the winter and then migrate back to the summer again. And instead, they're becoming the casualties of these mortality events. We also know that they're expanding their foraging efforts in time and space because they may require additional energy to go to different places to find new prey or to find prey that are as good as the prey they used to have in the Chirikov Basin, for example. So we're getting kind of a sketchy picture of how environmental factors are affecting the prey production and prey availability for gray whales. But, we still have this conundrum of the females that are breeding, although there are fewer of them, they seem to be in pretty good condition. And their calves are in good condition, while the single females and males seem to be having a real rough go of it. So let's look at a little history. This particular plot represents the Pleistocene sea level curve going back 400,000 years. Gray whales have been around for somewhere between 200 and 160,000 years in time. But you can see that over this 400-year period that gray whales have and their ancestors have been evolving, there have been some dips where sea level has gone down as low as 120 feet below, or 120 meters below its current level today. In this particular representation, it looks like we've got 4 of these glacial intervals where the sea, the water was held up captive in ice caps and the sea level declined. And as a result, that created changes in the environment in which gray whales were evolving in. Here's a pictorial representation of that. The light green is the current sea level today, or the 0 point for this discussion. But the green shows you what the land mass was like when it was minus 120 meters below current sea level. And you can see that the continental shelf areas that the gray whales have traditionally fed upon in our lifetimes were not available for dry land. I mean, animals were migrating across from including humans, they say, from one continent to the next. For a gray whale, you basically you drop off the continental shelf, and now you're, in those days, 120,000 years ago, you're competing with other cetacean species that are also evolving. The rorquals, the fin whales, the blue whales, the minke whales, the humpbacks, and of course the right whales, the baleen that are the filter feeders. So all of these animals are evolving at the same time, and gray whales are in the mix. And so they have to compete with all the other cetacean species that are beginning to arise during this particular period of time, when the stuff that become available to the modern gray whales were not available at that time. But consider that gray whales have survived this over the millennia. The most recent Pleistocene glacial maximum ended about 18 to 20,000 years ago. Sea level was 120 meters lower than it is today presently. And historically, the known continental shelf feeding areas were above sea level and not available to marine mammals, including the gray whale, and moving into the Arctic was not possible because it was a land bridge between the continents. So let's talk about a little bit of paleontology. A good friend, Thomas Demure, with the San Diego Natural History Museum, the Department of Paleontology, gave a presentation a few years ago on the evolutionary biogeography and paleontology of Escherichted mysticete whales, AKA gray whales. And he pointed out that in the Miocene, roughly 20 million years ago, all of the different cetacean species were starting to diverge and evolving toward what they became in modern times. Moving up to the Pliocene is where we find the ancestors of the Archaeoescherichtids, or the early stem Escherichtids, are starting to take shape and starting to get better evolved and better defined, and evolving various lifestyles to compete with all the other cetaceans that are around. And the good example, which I'll show you in a second, is Escherichtoides gestaldi, which came to be during the Pliocene here. And then moving up in the Pleistocene, moving toward the Holocene, is where we find the evolution, the establishment of what we call the modern gray whale, the Escherichted robustus, that we have around today, and other Escherichted species that paleontologists still argue about when they find an old bone. But anyway, case in point, there's been a slow progression over the Miocene, Pliocene, and Pleistocene to the Holocene to get us to the gray whales that we have today. Well, what have they acquired along the way? Well, if we look at these ancestors here, we can see that, for example, the Japan fossil ancient Escherichtids are 2.5 to 2 million years old. San Diego, they dug one up in La Mesa that's 4.0 to 2.5 million years. And illustrated below, and if you haven't seen it in person, I encourage you to go down to the Natural History Museum in Balboa Park and take a look at Escherichtoides gestaldi. Now, it kind of looks like a gray whale, sort of, but it also looks kind of like maybe an early minke whale or a fin whale. It's got this elongated skull, but it's got some pretty good arching starting to show up here. It's got an interesting articulation behind the skull that is characteristic or moving toward a characteristic of modern gray whales. But if you look at it from the end, you can see that the skull is beginning to get this arch that develops in the modern gray whale. Another characteristic are the mandibles, excuse me, Ray, that are not fused at the tip. And this is current with modern gray whales. And you've seen some of the videos of them feeding underwater. You know, the left and the right side can actually flap open and closed as they're scooping up and sucking up sediments from the bottom. Is a very unique characteristic of the gray whales that has evolved as part of their benthic feeding ecology, which is unique to the gray whales. Our good friend and mentor, Ray Gilmore, was a collector par excellence, and he collected a skull, actually many skulls from Baja California, but there's the modern gray whale. And you can see the similarities between this and that ancestral Escherichtid. We got the nice curving upper jaw. We've got the unhinged mandibles at the bottom to allow each left and right side to flex and suck up stuff. What we don't see are the soft tissues, of course, the musculature that allow them to take and expand their gullet, not like a humpback or a blue whale. It's not that extensive, but they can suck up volumes of water and sediment with it and then filter it. So we see we're on our way to a modern gray whale here. Now, Tom concluded that Escherichtids were formerly much more diverse than they are now. And like I said, every time they build something in La Mesa, they find another piece of an old gray whale and they try to figure out what it is or where it fits. But in the Pleistocene and Pliocene, Escherichtids were found in sublittoral and nearshore maritime deposits. So that gives us a timestamp as to when they were evolving. Early Pliocene, North Atlantic origin, followed by dispersal in the North Pacific. The earliest gray whale fossils or ancient stem gray whales are found in what's now the Mediterranean Sea. Before the Isthmus of Panama blocked the transfer between both the oceans. Gray whales moved into the Pacific, where they continued to evolve. The middle to late Pliocene, the speciation of the gray whale continued in the North Pacific with the ultimate evolution of Escherichtus that we know today. And in warm interglacial periods, they moved back into the North Atlantic, presumably over the over the Northwest Passage, over above Canada and back down past Greenland into the Atlantic, and were established there for a while. We know that because there are historical whaling records of gray whales. Were called a scrag whale in those days, and they were whaled to extinction in the North Atlantic, and we're still finding subfossil remains of gray whales in the Atlantic. And most recently, if you recall, in 2010 and again in 2012, a gray whale was photographed in the Mediterranean. Obviously got over there during the summer when the Northwest Passage was open, couldn't get back, and so went into the Mediterranean to try and hang out and was photographed. A second one actually crossed the equator a few years later and was photographed off of Africa, Namibia. And those are the two known re-entries into the Atlantic of gray whales, Pacific gray whales, in historical times. And there probably were more that were not seen. Whether or not they can get another toehold there as the climate continues to evolve and change the Arctic, we don't know, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But it is possible. And then benthic suction feeding is something that probably started out a long time ago based on the fossils. Fossil record of the Archaeoescherichtids, that they started specializing in benthic feeding, and that has set apart, of course, the modern gray whale from the other species today. Now, Sue Moore reminds us that gray whales, while they do specialize in benthic bottom feeding, can also prey switch, and they can also skim like a right whale to a certain degree, and they can also gulp like a blue whale or a fin whale. So they can prey switch to, they're not restricted to just feeding off the bottom. They can feed on swarming mysids, chamaceans, crab larvae, zooplankton, such as krill. And that's what leads researchers now to begin to investigate off the Arctic there, where there are abundant krill blooms and gray whales seem to be hanging out in those areas, that they may be augmenting the lost benthic communities, or the benthic communities no longer accessible to them, by prey switching and working with krill. The question is, are those nutritionally as valuable to a gray whale during the summer as their amphipods populations that they used to historically and traditionally feed upon? If not, this could be one of the reasons why we're seeing late migrations, why we're seeing skinny whales that aren't making it through the winter, and so on and so forth. So, noted biologist S.L. Schwartz has concluded that they're robustest for a reason. Gray whales are a coastal species with a generalist and flexible feeding strategy shaped by evolution along a dynamic coastal environment. They're responsive to feeding opportunities throughout their range, and they can vary foraging methods accordingly. And their ability to use alternative prey, feeding modes, and locations have likely and obviously, in my opinion, resulted in their success. So if I were you, I wouldn't say goodbye to the gray whale just yet. They may be going through a rough patch, but we've seen from the history of their population that seems to oscillate every decade or two. They have rises and falls, but they manage to persist. Well, all of this from our end has been the result of our sponsors. We're very, very lucky to have over the last 15 years accumulate a community of people that believe in gray whales and believe in the work that we do in Mexico, trying to document what's going on down there during the breeding season and keep track of them, and then contribute all that information to the community of researchers and interested people like yourselves that want to know what's happening with gray whales and want to understand them better. There's a new dawn arising all the time. And so we're just looking forward to the next day. Hopefully, COVID allowing us, we'll be able to get down into Mexico this winter and can get the 2022 data sample. Hats off to all of our research colleagues and students over the years that have done all the heavy lifting. They do all the work. At the bottom, you'll note that since 2006, our students collectively have completed 8 bachelor's degrees, 10 masters, and 6 PhDs. So we're very, very proud of them. As the mystery of the gray whales continue to face us, we're slowly teasing it apart and learning more and more every time we go into the field and get more data. If you believe in the whales and the work we do in Mexico, we'd encourage you to please consider becoming a supporter. There are many, many ways you can do that safely online, one-time donation, or you can become a regular contributor of a small amount each month. And over the year, from lots of people, that amounts to some significant resources for us to keep the work going, to keep our researchers and our students on site and continuing to do this. To get more information, just go to our website, sanignaciograywhales.org/donate, or just go to sanignaciograywhales.org and have a look around. Everything we've ever done is posted on our website, and everything we will ever do gets posted on our website. So it's all public domain. It's all available to people like yourselves. You're a researcher, want to do some analyses, or you're just interested in learning more about them, please visit the website and have a look around. We like to think that the end of every rainbow is a gray whale. And if we have some time, I'll be happy to field some questions.
Okay, I'm gonna moderate that, and we have asked people to put questions in the chat room. If anybody looked at the chat room, that's where I'll go to ask you some questions. Before we actually get into your questions, though, we do have Carla from Oceanside Adventure, who has donated for people online tonight. She has 2 tickets available, but in order to figure out who's going to get them, we're going to have a little quiz. So the answer has to go into the chat room. So you might want to open your chat box, and down at the very bottom of your chat box, make sure it says to everyone. And Steve is going to have to be the adjudicator if we have. So earliest in with the right answer is going to get 2 tickets from Carla from Oceanside Adventures. And Rick. So the question before us tonight is going to be, which specific group within the population of gray whales is least affected by body wasting? Go. Dun, 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 dun.
The clock is ticking.
We'll play a little bit of and now they're really flying in. And we already have winter. Well, how would you answer that, Steve?
As best we can tell, and we're still trying to understand what's going on, it'd be the females that are breeding, those that are continuing to breed, that haven't suffered from the emaciation problem and become victims of the die-off.
So the first person with pregnant females, we got pregnant females lactating, a second pregnant female, females with calves, moms and calves. Which one of those would you select?
Oh boy.
Put you on the spot. You didn't know that you were going to have this much fun, huh?
Yeah. I think, again, based from what we see in Baja and the lagoons, it's the mothers with calves. So it'd be mother calf pairs.
So we got to do mothers with calves. So we've got the first person to say females with calves is going to be Brian Godfrey. So Brian, if you don't mind either putting your contact information off privately to Carla M, then you two can work that all out. Okay. If not, if that fails, send me a note at acssandiego10@gmail.com and I'll make sure that Carla gets that and she arranges the tickets for you. Very good job.
Rick,
Steve, always awesome. Go ahead.
We also have tickets to give away from the Midway Museum, courtesy of Don Senda.
Oh,
so if you'll ask another question.
I didn't prepare a second question.
Sorry.
I didn't prepare a second question. Uh-oh. Wow.
Or Steve, do you have a question?
Well, sure. Let me make one up here. We talked about the gray whales have some flexibility in what they can feed on and how they do it. What are the three modes of gray whale feeding? Their primary, and then what else can they do?
That's a good question. Excellent. Again, into the chat room. All right, we've got, I'll read the first couple answers. Bottom, gulping and skimming. Lunge, feeding and skimming. Benthic, sucking, lunge and skim. Benthic, that's the same. I don't know if anybody got that answer. Which of those do you like the best?
I think if the first one came in,
bottom gulping and skimming, that's Sue.
And then gulping and skimming, yeah.
Sue Fogel has that. And Leanne, do you want to try to capture that since?
Sure. So Sue Fogel was our winner?
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me come up here and share some questions. Phenomenal again, Steve. Always good to see you. I mean, it's just,
my pleasure.
Up right where we left off the last time. So awesome. Okay, let me just come back. All right. So it looks like, and I think you got this at the very end. Broadly speaking, this is Malia wants to know, broadly speaking, whale population is impacted by climate change.
Is that a question or a statement?
No, that was, well, it's supposed to be a question.
Well, let's put it this way. There's a whole plethora of outstanding oceanographers and Arctic scientists that are looking at all the stuff that's going on in the Arctic. And again, the take home there is it's happening at a much more accelerated rate than ever thought it would be, but it's happening. And they're trying to piece together what the changes in the oceanographic dynamics of seasonal upwelling, the lack of seasonal ice melt, freshwater melt into that system, the movement and transport of warm, less saline water into the Arctic from the Bering Sea area to the south, how that's changing the communities of the infauna, the benthic communities of prey, as well as the pelagic type prey like the krill that Sue mentioned in her presentation. There's new hotspots and the whales seem to be going to the hotspots. So guess what they're doing there. Areas that are still under investigation are, are these permanent changes, or are these going to be dynamic changes over time? Somebody needs to get out there and find out what the gray whales are actually feeding on north of the Bering Straits, in these areas that they've started aggregating in over the summer months. Find out what species they're feeding on, what's the nutritional value, how does it compare with amphipods? Can they conceivably get enough energy feeding in the summer on these alternative prey in different areas than they used to get feeding on a traditional area like the Chirikov Basin, and basically be able to fatten up for the summer and then get down and spend a winter without eating and then migrate back north again the following spring and summer and get a full tank of gas, where it appears now they're not getting a full tank of gas. I mean, in the winter in Mexico, we should see fat whales coming down off of 3 months of feeding furiously in the Arctic. It doesn't take that much energy to migrate. They're very good at, conserving energy during their migration south, and they live off that fat. They're going to lose some weight, sure, we know that, but they shouldn't run out. And what we're seeing are skinny whales arriving when they should be fat after feeding all summer, and they're not. And basically, they're just not making it when they turn around and try to go north again. And that's what's, we believe, a major contributor to these die-offs that we're seeing. We're not discounting, disease and epidemics and other things like that, but that's all under investigation right now. And we won't know until, the word's out on those types of things. But it certainly appears to be a major nutritional issue for these guys.
I'm going to combine a question from Karen and Dave. They kind of are, I think, a little bit related. And that is, I'll start off, are some of the organisms the gray whale feed on in the Arctic decreasing in numbers due to acidification and its effect on calcium carbonate shells? Any specific studies, info on specific organism populations directly related to the gray whale diet? Followed with, has anybody been monitoring the radiation levels due to the Fukushima event in Japan and the possible effect on ecosystem and the food chain? Go.
I don't have any information on the latter, although I've seen online some of the plots of the radioactive seawater plumes that get into the North Pacific Gyre and come down along our coast. And again, I don't have any good data on it, but it appears to be showing up in food chains in different places at different levels. That's all I can say about that. That's you'd have to go to another source for information on the outcome of the Fukushima radioactive water plumes. As far as the gray whales and their prey, this is an active area of investigation as we sit here right now. I mean, this is stuff that's currently underway. As I pointed out, this is all happening much, much faster. The climate change impacts on the Arctic and its functions and its dynamics are happening in real time, much more quickly than people ever expected them to be. And the implications and the changes that's inflicting upon the invertebrates that the gray whales in particular feed upon, but other marine species, birds, fish, and so on, are actively being researched right now. And it just takes time to get those answers and to get information on that. But we will be getting it. Stand by, watch the literature, go to conferences, tune in on talks like this one for people that are knowledgeable or actively involved in those areas of research. And we'll be getting some answers here as the weeks and months and the new years go by.
I might just put in a cheap plug for going to a conference. The ACS will be holding a conference in San Diego in November of 2022, all with our fingers crossed. And we will hope to have such data potentially available then. So George wants to know, I've always heard that gray whales carry significant ectoparasite loads due to their bottom feeding habits. If they're feeding less on the bottom, are you noticing a reduction in ectoparasite loads?
Not particularly. The ectoparasites are primarily the barnacles that are species specific to the gray whale. and 3 species of whale lice, the little, actually they're an amphipod, but a flattened one. And they vary in their concentrations on the animals. Some of them, some of the whales come in with heavy loads and others don't. And we've also noticed from our photo ID studies that it may change over time. We may see a whale as a juvenile that's got a heavy parasite load, external parasite load. And then as we see it a couple of years later, it's lost a lot of that, it's cleaned it. So we're not sure if that's just a regional thing. You know, there's an old folkloric sort of tale that the Russians would tell, that gray whales would move into the Kamchatka area in the summer and go to the river mouths and roll around in the fresh water, because that would be a way for them to rid themselves of their ectoparasites. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but you know, native people that live in areas know a lot of stuff that we certainly don't know anything about. So
okay,
that's something to think about. But there doesn't seem to be any change in the ectoparasite loads on these guys.
Carrie asked, has anyone done work on counting whales in Ojo de Libre? Are some of the whales stopping sooner?
Yes, there are a team of researchers that work through Exportadero de Sal's biology department, and they do with the Biosphere Reserve staff. They conduct a whale count very similar to what we do in San Ignacio and in Bahia Magdalena. It's a little bit bigger area. It's like 8 or 9 times the size of San Ignacio, and it has 2 kind of arms. So they have to run 2 boats simultaneously to do their survey counts. But yes, we do get counts from Ojo de Libre through their efforts to compare with what we're seeing in San Ignacio and in Bahia Magdalena. Remember that the Ojo de Libre lagoon is population-wise the stronghold of the Northeastern Pacific gray whale. If we have 500 gray whales in San Ignacio, they've got 1,500 up there in Ojo de Libre in a normal year. What we do know, as we've seen further south, they've also seen a decline in the calving numbers, fewer calves up there in Ojo de Libre, and fewer animals, and also higher stranding rates up there. So that the same symptoms that we're seeing in San Ignacio and further south in Bahia Magdalena are also being reflected in Ojo de Libre.
Very good. Brian wants to know, or is pondering, could it be that the pregnant females or females with calves are so healthy because the burden of motherhood is such that the ones in poor health either die or lose their calves, hence becoming emaciated single females?
I like the logic. Yes, we're thinking of the same kind of things. In other words, if they're weakened to the point that they are running out of fuel to migrate, there's very little chance that a pregnant female could bring a calf to term. And even if she did birth a calf, would she have enough energy to nurse it, to keep it alive? And so, you know, yes, there's an axiom in biology that animals, mammals in particular, if they're undergoing severe stress, a breeding female will either abort or will not conceive in order to keep herself alive, because she may find better times further on and be able to breed, you know, when times are better, rather than die. Unfortunately, in these unusual mortality events, we're finding adult females dying at the same rate as males in the population. So we're losing. Presumably, we're losing a lot of the adult breeding stock when these events happen, and that could account for why we're not seeing as many calves as we used to.
Julie wants to know, have any of the Flakkas exhibited friendly behavior in the lagoons? Flakkas in quotes.
Not to my experience or to my knowledge, no.
And then Florence is asking, of the 200 dead animals, has anyone examined them for heavy metals or other toxins?
Yes, those types of assays are being conducted as we speak.
And sorry if I'm not getting to everybody's. Glenn wants to know what the best place to watch gray whales from San Diego on those fabulous whale watching boats that are giving away tickets. That's
there you go. There you go. That's a good way to see them.
Or Point Loma. All right. And then Carla says also, thanks for a great presentation. ACS members pay $29 on their oceanside adventures. So just identify yourself as well, become a member if you're not a member. For all of you that are online, we are a membership organization, so become that. Yeah. And then the rest of them, well, it's pretty much emaciated women often don't menstruate, but the emaciated female whales have fertility problems, or as you said, don't have. So yeah, so she was just, I guess, cutting that up. I think I got through it. I apologize to anybody, but Steve is on the East Coast, and it's the late news has already come and gone, and it's time for the late show, and so we have to be respectful of his biological rhythm. I want him to be around for a long time. I enjoy my friend, and I'll toss it back to you, to Leanne, to close this out.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. It's a pleasure to hear from you, and I hope you're able to get back to the lagoon soon. I only get to go for a weekend at a time on occasion, and I can't imagine, as someone that goes out there for months at a time, and it's been 2 years now. So I hope you get out there soon.
Keeping our fingers crossed that we'll be able to travel. So
well, and I just want to mention too that we had 98 viewers, so that's huge for us. So that's incredible and awesome, and thank you again so much. And again, to all those out there, as Rick said, we are looking for more members, and you can check us out at acssandiego.org. And good night. I hope you enjoy the late night television.
It has been my pleasure and an honor to be amongst my friends again. So I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Keep watching the gray whales, keep asking questions, and we'll try to do what we can to come up with some answers. And most importantly, please stay safe.
Yes,
we look forward to you. We look forward to you and your colleagues presenting at our national conference.
That would be nice.
A big hug to Mary Lou.
I will do that. We'll pass that along.
And putting in a few extra photos, I think, really helped. So tell her that she was right on.
I'll let her know that.
All right.
There was
Thank
also,
you, everybody.
I was going to say, there was also a shout out from Celia saying that she and Art hope to have you back on the Searcher, where you belong soon. So hopefully
that's right.
That works out too.
That's right. That's the best whale watching boat around for sure.
Okay.
All right, good night, everybody. It is recorded.
Thank you so much. Yeah, send us the link so we can share it with our family and friends. And
we'll do.
It's been a great opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.